"I'll be gentle, I promise," the millionaire whispered on their wedding night. No one expected that promise would change everything, that she would truly fall in love that very night. Where are you watching from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, because what happened after that promise will touch your heart. The lace dress weighed like chains as Cordelia climbed the marble steps of the mansion. Each footfall echoed in the cold silence of that June night, and the scent of magnolia from the garden mingled with the aroma of polished oak from the immense entrance hall. The crystal chandeliers above her head cast dancing shadows on the silk-papered walls, creating the illusion that even the walls were watching her ascent toward a destiny she didn't yet fully understand. She had married less than 3 hours ago a man she barely knew, Thaddeus Whitmore, 38 years old, real estate mogul, eyes grey as steel that never revealed emotion. Now she walked toward the master bedroom, her heart pounding so hard she felt her pulse at her temples, in the hollow of her throat, in the tips of her fingers that trembled slightly against the rosewood banister. The deal was done. The money was in her mother's bank account. The medical treatment for the cancer slowly consuming the woman who had raised her alone could begin tomorrow. But the price? The price remained to be paid. At 23, Cordelia Ashford had sacrificed her dreams of studying architecture at university to care for her ailing mother and keep the small family flower shop running in the historic French Quarter. Her hands, always scented with damp earth and crushed petals, bore the calluses of relentless work. Her chestnut hair, usually tied in a practical ponytail, now fell in elaborate curls created by a hairstylist she could never have afforded. When the bedroom door closed behind her, the sound of the lock made her entire body stiffen. Thaddeus stood there, his back turned, before the panoramic window overlooking downtown Charleston, illuminated below. The city lights reflected in the dark waters of the Ashley River like stars fallen from the sky. His imposing silhouette against the nightlights resembled a painting of power and absolute distance. Throughout the entire wedding, he hadn't smiled once. During the civil ceremony at City Hall, his vows were mechanical, precise, empty of any warmth. He had signed the documents with the efficiency of a man signing yet another business contract. She expected coldness. She perhaps even expected disdain. What she didn't expect were the words he murmured when he finally turned to face her. "I'll be gentle, I promise." The deep voice trembled slightly on the last word, and for the first time that evening, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't indifference. It was fear, fear of hurting her. Fear of being like those other powerful men she surely imagined, brutal, possessive, regarding their wives as acquisitions. That night, he didn't touch her with possession, but with a reverence that completely disarmed her. His fingers, which signed million-dollar contracts, trembled as they brushed a strand of hair from her face. His lips, which gave orders to hundreds of employees, murmured words of comfort as if she were made of crystal. And when dawn painted the sky pink and gold above the Battery and the harbor, she realized something unthinkable had happened. She had begun to fall in love. But love, she would soon discover, was only the beginning of a far more complex story. Cordelia was a woman forged in adversity. At 23, she had sacrificed her dreams of studying architecture to care for her sick mother and maintain the small family flower shop in Charleston's French Quarter. Her hands, always perfumed with earth and petals, bore the calluses of hard work. Her pride was armor she never lowered, even when the hospital bill exceeded any amount she could gather in 10 lifetimes. And her compassion. Her compassion was so deep that she had accepted this marriage not from selfish desperation, but because she couldn't bear to see the suffering in her mother's tired eyes. The conflict that tore her apart inside was brutal. Every time Thaddeus bought her something, a silk dress from New York, a pair of emerald earrings, a trip to Savannah she cancelled, she felt like an imposter. Accepting this life of luxury seemed to betray everything she was. Yet refusing seemed like ingratitude. How to balance gratitude and dignity, how to accept help without losing herself. Thaddeus, for his part, was an enigma wrapped in tailored suits. At 38, he had built a real estate empire from nothing, having grown up in South Carolina foster homes without ever knowing what it meant to belong to someone. His motivation for this arranged marriage, discreetly organized by an agency that assisted families in difficulty, was desperately simple: He yearned for an authentic connection in a world where every smile directed at him had a price. He wanted someone who would see him beyond the fortune, and ironically he chose the most transactional path possible to find it. The first months were a delicate dance of approach and retreat. The three-story mansion, located in the exclusive South of Broad neighborhood, where centuries-old live oaks perfumed the wide avenues, became the theater of small daily discoveries. She learned that he rose at 5 in the morning to swim in the indoor pool, methodical movements she secretly observed from the bedroom balcony. He discovered she hid dark chocolate in the nightstand and ate 1 square every evening while reading, and he began leaving different bars from Charleston's artisan chocolatiers for her to find, never mentioning it. The first small twist came when he cancelled the elaborate honeymoon in the Bahamas. She had already mentally prepared herself for 2 weeks of awkwardness in luxury hotels, smiling for fake photos. Instead, he transformed the mansion's garden into a private refuge. String lights intertwined in the branches of the live oaks, a white canvas tent with oriental cushions, and a projector showing films by Scorsese she had mentioned loving once, almost inadvertently. "I thought you'd prefer the privacy so we could get to know each other," he explained, vulnerability transparent in every word. But the outside world hadn't forgotten them. Millicent, his personal assistant, an elegant woman in her 40s with hazel eyes that saw everything, maintained a polite but clear distance. Her motivation was fierce protection. She had worked for Thaddeus for 12 years, since he was just a young entrepreneur with more ambition than resources, and she had witnessed his broken heart before. She didn't want to see that again. "Give him time to show who she really is," she warned in a silent corridor, not knowing that Cordelia had heard every word. The prenuptial agreement, presented a week before the wedding, seemed brutal in its legal precision. Clauses about separation of assets, custody limitations in case of children, restrictions on access to business accounts. Cordelia signed without reading everything, too humiliated to process the details. Months later, when she finally had the courage to open the document stored in the drawer, she discovered a hidden clause on page 17. In case of separation, whatever the reason, she would receive lifetime financial support and total ownership of 3 properties. He had been protecting her from the beginning, even while doubting she would stay. Southern culture, where culinary traditions mixed with regional pride and Protestant devotion, impacted every decision. Family was everything. Reputation was sacred. A marriage, even arranged, was a commitment before God, the community, and future generations. When his family, uncles, cousins, a 90-year-old matriarch grandmother named Eugenia, finally met her during a formal dinner at Easter, the weight of expectations was palpable. The white linen tablecloth, the antique silver cutlery, the aroma of she-crab soup with fresh herbs. Everything carried centuries of Charleston tradition. "She's not one of us," Eugenia declared loudly enough for everyone to hear, her eyes fixed on Cordelia's less elegant posture, on the hands that held the silverware with the determination of someone who learned etiquette from books, not gala dinners. Her youth, so evident compared to the other family members, seemed only to increase the disdain in the matriarch's eyes. Thaddeus stood from the table. The silence was absolute. "Then I'll be one of them," he replied calmly, extending his hand to Cordelia. They left together under shocked stares, leaving behind the sound of church bells ringing for Easter, and she knew it would cost him. Family was everything to him, too. It was the family he'd never had, and had finally built through business ties that became effective. Choosing her meant risking those carefully constructed bridges. The crisis came in the 6th month. Like storms over the Ashley River have a habit of coming. Sudden and devastating. The company faced a corruption scandal involving a business partner in Atlanta. Stocks plummeted. Investors threatened lawsuits. The press camped outside the mansion. She saw the confident man transform into someone who slept 3 hours a night, his face grey with exhaustion, hands trembling over contracts that could save everything or destroy everything. It was then that Cordelia finally lowered her armor, not with empty words of comfort, but with actions. She took charge of managing the household so he wouldn't have to think about anything but the crisis. She prepared low-country boil and shrimp and grits he could eat between meetings, and on a particularly dark night, When she found him in the study crying silently over financial documents, she simply sat beside him and took his hand. "You're not alone in this," she said. And for the first time he believed her. Luxury can buy comfort, but never inner peace. The awakening was strange. Golden morning light filtered through white linen curtains, creating delicate patterns on the Egyptian cotton sheets. Cordelia opened her eyes slowly, momentarily confused about where she was. The ceiling was decorated with intricate moldings she didn't recognize. The smell wasn't that of her small room above the flower shop, with its mixed scents of roses and jasmine. Then memory returned like a cold wave. She was married. Beside her, the other half of the king-size bed was empty but still warm. On the pillow rested a handwritten note on thick cream paper. "Breakfast is on the veranda. Take your time. Tea." The handwriting was precise, almost architectural, each letter formed with care. Cordelia rose slowly, her bare feet sinking into a Persian rug so soft it seemed made of clouds. The room was immense, 3 times the size of her entire apartment. French doors opened onto a private balcony overlooking a meticulously maintained English garden. Century-old live oaks bordered white gravel pathways. A carved stone fountain sang softly at the center. In the adjacent bathroom, all white Carrara marble veined with grey, she found her things already unpacked and arranged. But who had unpacked them? Certainly not Thaddeus. A maid, probably. The idea of someone touching her modest clothes, her worn underwear, her dog-eared books on Gothic architecture, made her cheeks flush. She showered quickly, uncomfortable with the ostentatious luxury. There were 6 different shower heads, 12 types of artisan soaps lined up like soldiers on a glass shelf, towels so thick and plush they must have cost more than her second-hand wedding dress. When she finally descended, dressed in her simple blue cotton dress, consciously refusing the designer clothes she'd found hanging in the enormous closet, she followed the sound of classical music to the veranda. Thaddeus sat at a table set for 2, already dressed in an impeccable charcoal grey suit despite the early hour. He was reading the Wall Street Journal, his reading glasses perched on his straight nose. Without them, she hadn't noticed the night before how long his eyelashes were for a man. "Good morning," she said softly. He looked up, and something passed across his face, too quick for her to identify. Surprise, relief. "Good morning," he replied, carefully folding his newspaper. "I hope you slept well." Polite lie, she thought. She had barely slept, too aware of his presence beside her, too overwhelmed by everything that had changed in one night. Breakfast was a feast. Croissants still warm from the artisan bakery on King Street, homemade fig and peach preserves, local cheeses, freshly squeezed orange juice, steaming coffee in Wedgwood china cups. "I don't know what you like," Thaddeus explained, a hint of vulnerability in his usually controlled voice, "so I asked for a bit of everything." It was that moment, that simple admission that he didn't know her, that slightly cracked the armor she'd built around her heart. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't acting as if this marriage was normal. He was acknowledging the strangeness of their situation. "I like croissants," she said, reaching for one. "With strawberry jam, if you have it." He smiled, the first smile she'd seen from him, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "I'll remember that." In every house, there exist invisible rules more binding than any lock. The first days passed in a sort of strange, choreographed ballet. Thaddeus left early in the morning for his offices in the business district near Market Street, a glass and steel high-rise where his real estate empire orchestrated million-dollar transactions. He returned late, often after 9, his face marked by the fatigue and tension of a man carrying too many responsibilities. Cordelia, for her part, discovered the unwritten rules of her new life. Millicent Pembroke, Thaddeus's personal assistant, was an elegant woman in her 40s with black hair pulled into a strict chignon and hazel eyes that saw everything. She maintained a polite but clear distance, treating Cordelia with a professional courtesy that never reached warmth. "Mr. Whitmore takes his coffee black, no sugar," Millicent informed her the 3rd morning as Cordelia attempted to prepare breakfast herself. "He prefers his shirts pressed with light starch. He doesn't like to be disturbed before 8 in the morning." Each sentence was an established boundary, a defended territory. "You're new here. I'm the one who knows him." "I can do it myself," Cordelia protested. When Millicent tried to take the tray she'd prepared to carry up to Thaddeus's study, Millicent raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Mrs. Whitmore, that's not your role. We have staff for that." Mrs. Whitmore. The title sounded false in her ears. She wasn't Mrs. Whitmore. She was Cordelia Ashford playing the role of Mrs. Whitmore. But she carried the tray up anyway, knocked softly on the study door, entered when she heard the distracted, "Come in." Thaddeus was on the phone, speaking rapidly in what sounded like Mandarin with what appeared to be a Chinese investor. He looked up, surprised to see her, and gestured for her to place the tray on the corner of the massive mahogany desk. She obeyed but didn't leave immediately. Instead, she observed the room. The walls were covered with diplomas and photographs, Thaddeus shaking hands with Charleston's mayor at the inauguration of a new residential complex, Thaddeus receiving an award for his affordable housing initiatives, Thaddeus, younger, in front of a small dilapidated building with a sold sign, probably his first acquisition, but no personal photos, no family mementos, no smiling faces of friends on vacations. When he finally hung up, she asked the question that had haunted her for 3 days. "Why me?" He looked at her for a long time, his grey eyes impossible to decipher. "Why not you? You could have chosen anyone. Someone from your world. Someone who knows how to—" She made a vague gesture encompassing the luxury surrounding them. "Navigate all this." Thaddeus stood from his leather chair, walked around the desk to stand before her. He was tall, almost a foot taller than her, and she had to tilt her head up to maintain eye contact. "Because someone from my world would have married me for my money, while pretending it wasn't so," he said calmly. "At least with you, the transaction is honest. You need help, I can provide it. In exchange, I get—" He paused, searching for words. "Companionship. Companionship. Not love. Not even affection. Just companionship." "That's all?" she asked. Her pride stung in a way she didn't fully understand. "I'm just an acquired companion?" "No," he replied quickly, something igniting in his eyes. "You're my wife. By choice. Yours and mine. But was it really a choice when the alternative was watching her mother die? Every gift carries an invisible weight, that of unrequested gratitude. The first dress arrived a week after the wedding. A package delivered by courier in an elegant black box with a silver silk ribbon. Inside, wrapped in white tissue paper, rested a cocktail dress in emerald silk from a New York designer whose name alone probably cost more than 6 months' rent on her old apartment. There was a card. For the charity gala Saturday. Tea. Cordelia held the dress against herself in front of the bedroom mirror. It was magnificent, obviously. The silk flowed like green water, embracing curves she didn't even know she had. But looking at it, all she felt was a tight knot in her stomach. She hadn't asked for it. She didn't want to go to a charity gala filled with people from Thaddeus's world who would judge her and find her lacking in everything. She just wanted to be. "It's magnificent, isn't it?" Millicent's voice made her jump. The assistant stood in the doorway, her expression inscrutable. "Mr. Whitmore has impeccable taste." "It's too much," Cordelia murmured, carefully refolding the dress. "Too much?" Millicent entered the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "My dear, this is only the beginning. You're Mrs. Whitmore now. There's a certain standard to maintain." Standard. As if she were a product that must meet specifications. "I didn't ask him for this," Cordelia said more firmly. "I didn't ask for the dresses or the jewelry or—" She looked around the sumptuous room. "Any of this." Millicent crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "No? Then why did you accept this marriage?" The question landed like a slap. "You don't know him," Millicent continued, her voice low but intense. "You don't know what he endured to get here. Orphaned at 7, raised in cold institutions where nobody cared about him. He built all this," she made a broad gesture, "from nothing. And now you're here taking everything he offers, and you dare say it's too much." Tears burned Cordelia's eyes. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," Millicent replied. "A pretty girl who found an easy way out of poverty. Don't break him, he's been broken enough already." She left, leaving Cordelia standing with the expensive dress in her hands and heavy guilt in her heart. That evening, when Thaddeus returned, she waited for him in the living room. The dress was folded on the velvet sofa between them. "I can't accept this," she said without preamble. He looked at the dress, then at her. Confusion crossed his face. "You don't like it? I can ask the stylist to—" "It's not that." She took a deep breath. "Every time you buy me something, I feel like I'm for sale. Like our marriage is just another transaction where you pay and I accept." Silence stretched between them, taut as a violin string. Then Thaddeus sat heavily, running a tired hand over his face. "I don't know how to do it differently," he finally admitted, his voice low. "I don't know how to show I care without—" He made a helpless gesture toward the dress. "I never learned another way." And in that confession, Cordelia saw the painful truth. He was as lost as she was in this strange marriage. Two people who didn't know how to reach each other across the chasm of their differences. The deepest roots grow in silence, away from prying eyes. The solution came in an unexpected form. One July morning, as the heat transformed Charleston into an oven, and even the cicadas seemed too exhausted to sing, Cordelia descended into the garden before dawn. The air was still relatively cool, carrying the heavy scent of blooming magnolias. The professional gardener came 3 times a week, maintaining everything in manicured perfection. But at the back of the property, near the brick wall covered in ivy, she discovered a neglected corner. Weeds grew through broken flagstones. An old wrought-iron bench rusted beneath a weeping willow. It was imperfect. It was neglected. It was perfect. She started the next morning. Armed with gardening gloves she'd found in the shed, she pulled weeds, dug into the hard earth. The sensation of soil under her nails, the smell of rich humus, the physical work that made her muscles tremble. It was all familiar. It belonged to her old life, to who she really was. "What are you doing?" She looked up to find Thaddeus standing there, his coffee cup in hand, in dress pants but no jacket, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled to his elbows. It must have been 6 in the morning. "I'm gardening," she replied simply, sitting back on her heels. "If that's allowed." He looked at the small square of earth she'd cleared, then at her. "Why here? The gardener can—" "I don't want the gardener to do it," she interrupted. "I want to do it myself. I need to—" She searched for words. "Make something with my hands, create something." Thaddeus sipped his coffee, steam rising in the morning air. "What will you plant?" "Roses," she said immediately. "Old-fashioned roses like my mother had. Blue hydrangeas, lavender, herbs, thyme, rosemary, sage. I want this place to smell." She stopped, suddenly embarrassed to share too much. "Smell like what?" "Like home," she admitted softly. Something changed in his expression. He set his coffee cup on the rusted bench and knelt beside her in the dirt. "Then let me help you." She blinked, surprised. "You'll ruin your suit." "I have others." He smiled, that rare smile that transformed his face. "Show me what to do." They worked side by side for an hour before he had to leave for the office. Cordelia taught him how to test the soil, how to create furrows for seeds, how to be gentle with delicate roots. His hands, accustomed to signing contracts and shaking hands during negotiations, fumbled awkwardly in the earth. "It's harder than it looks," he admitted, wiping sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt. She laughed, the first authentic laugh since the wedding. "Everything worthwhile is." When he finally left, his white shirt was irredeemably stained. Millicent would be horrified. But Cordelia treasured in her heart the image of him kneeling in the dirt beside her, his millionaire's hands mixed with hers, creating something together. The garden became their refuge. Every morning before the world woke, they met there. They didn't talk much, just about practical matters regarding plants, soil, sun, but the silence between them became comfortable, almost intimate. One morning, as they planted tulip bulbs for the next spring, Thaddeus asked the question that would change everything. "Are you happy here?" Cordelia paused, a bulb in her hand. It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. Was she happy? She had everything she materially needed. Her mother was receiving the best treatments. She lived in luxury she'd never imagined. But happiness? "I'm at peace," she finally said. "When I'm here in the earth, I feel like myself. And when you're not here—" She looked at him, really looked, the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, the tension in his shoulders that never completely disappeared, the loneliness he wore like an invisible cloak. "When I'm not here, I feel like someone else," she admitted, "someone playing a role." He nodded slowly. I understand. I've felt that way forever. Playing the role of the ruthless businessman, the self-made man, the eligible bachelor, he planted his bulb carefully. Maybe that's why I wanted this marriage. To stop performing, at least at home. But I'm performing a role too, Cordelia said softly. That of your wife. Then maybe, he said, looking up at her, something vulnerable and hopeful in his gaze. We could both stop performing. Just be. And in that secret garden they were creating together, surrounded by rich earth and the promise of flowers to come, Cordelia felt the first true bud of hope bloom in her chest. Storms always arrive when the sky seems clearest. The scandal exploded in September like thunder in a blue sky. Cordelia woke one morning to find Thaddeus already gone, unusual even for him, and Millicent waiting in the living room, her face pale and tense. "You should turn on the television," the assistant said, her voice strangely gentle. On CNN, headlines scrolled in urgent red. Whitmore Properties, implicated in corruption scandal. Investigation opened. Cordelia's blood ran cold. She listened, horrified, as the anchor detailed the accusations. A former business partner in Atlanta had been arrested for bribing city officials to obtain building permits. Allegedly falsified documents bore signatures from Thaddeus's company. Millions of dollars in suspicious transactions. "It's not possible," Cordelia murmured. "He would never—" "Of course not," Millicent interrupted, her fierce loyalty transparent. "Mr. Whitmore is the most honest man I know. But that doesn't matter. Perception is reality in business." Her phone rang. It was Thaddeus. "You've seen it," he said without preamble. His voice sounded exhausted, beaten. "I'm sorry you're being dragged into this." "Where are you?" "At the office. With the lawyers. Cordelia, listen to me." He took a shaky breath. "The next few months are going to be difficult, very difficult. The press will harass you. My family will... They'll say things. If you want to leave, I'll understand. Your mother's account will stay funded no matter what, I promise you that. Leave." The option hung there like a lifeline, but Cordelia thought of the garden they'd created together, of the mornings spent in the earth, of the way he'd whispered, "I'll be gentle" on their first night, of the man beneath the suit and the empire, the man who didn't know how to love but was desperately trying to learn. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. Shocked silence on the other end. Then, "Why?" "Because you're not alone in this," she replied, unconsciously echoing the words he'd once said. "We're married, for better or worse, right?" A muffled sound she couldn't identify. Then, "Thank you," in a whisper so low she barely heard it. The following weeks were a nightmare. Whitmore Properties stock plummeted, losing 40% of its value in 3 days. Investors threatened lawsuits. Business partners distanced themselves. The press camped outside the mansion with cameras and shouted questions every time someone exited. Thaddeus changed before her eyes. The confident, controlled man transformed into someone who slept 3 hours a night, his face grey with exhaustion, hands trembling over contracts that could save everything or destroy everything. He lost weight. Grey hair appeared at his temples overnight, and Cordelia discovered something in herself she didn't know she possessed, a fierce strength. She, who had played the role of the timid, out-of-place wife, suddenly lowered her armor. Not with empty words of comfort, but with actions. She took charge of managing the household so he wouldn't have to think about anything but the crisis. She learned to manage the staff, to plan meals, to maintain an appearance of normalcy. She prepared his favorite dishes, crab soup, shrimp and grits, that he could eat between emergency meetings. She faced reporters with icy calm, saying nothing but not running either. Loyalty is measured not in sunny days but in the darkest storms. It was during Easter in April that the worst happened. Thaddeus's family, uncles, cousins, the matriarch grandmother named Eugenia, had organized the traditional annual family dinner. Thaddeus had wanted to cancel, but Cordelia insisted they go. "You can't hide forever," she said, adjusting his tie in the entrance hall mirror, "and I'll be by your side." The family estate in the historic district resembled a palace. 3 floors of honey-colored brick with dark green shutters, overlooking all of Charleston. Inside, the crystal chandelier cast rainbows on the damask silk-covered walls. The long dining room table was set with immaculate white linen tablecloth, antique silver cutlery, Waterford crystal glasses. The atmosphere was glacial despite the fire roaring in the marble fireplace. Eugenia Whitmore, 90 years old and rigid as steel, sat at the head of the table like a judge presiding over a court. Her eyes, still piercing despite her age, assessed Cordelia from head to toe with evident disdain. "So, this is the wife," she said, not as an introduction but as an accusation. The dinner was unbearable. Each course, she-crab soup with wild thyme, honey-glazed ham, collard greens, was served with palpable tension. Conversation stopped when Cordelia tried to participate. Her attempts to navigate the multiple pieces of silverware were watched with critical looks. Her way of holding her wine glass prompted murmurs. Then came the fatal blow. "She's not one of us," Eugenia declared loudly enough for everyone to hear, staring at Cordelia with cold eyes. "A shop girl who married our blood for money. And now look what she's brought. Scandal, shame, ruin." Silence fell like a stone in a deep well. Cordelia felt her cheeks burn. Her hands clenched in her lap under the table. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to run from those judging stares, from this public humiliation. But then she felt something warm cover her hand. Thaddeus. He had slipped his hand under the table to take hers, their fingers interlaced in a gesture of silent solidarity. He stood, slowly, deliberately. All eyes turned to him. "Grandmother," he said, his voice calm but carrying an authority that silenced even the whispers, "you're wrong. About everything." "Thaddeus, sit down," Eugenia ordered. "No." He kept his hand in Cordelia's. "For years, I've sought to earn your approval, to be good enough for this family, to deserve the Whitmore name despite my origins. But I realize now that it was never going to be possible, because you measure worth in lineages and bank accounts. How dare you— Cordelia is worth 10 times anyone sitting at this table," he continued, his voice hardening. "She stayed by my side during the scandal while my so-called business partners fled. She worked in the dirt with me to create something beautiful. She saw me at my worst and didn't look away." He gently pulled Cordelia to stand beside him. "So if she's not one of yours," he said softly, looking at each person in turn, "then neither am I." They left together, hand in hand, under shocked stares. Outside, Easter bells rang through Charleston. Spring flowers perfumed the air. And in the midst of that beauty, Thaddeus stopped, turned to Cordelia, and for the first time in weeks, she saw his eyes shine, not with tears, but with something resembling liberation. "I'm sorry," he said. "You deserved better than that." "No," she replied, raising her free hand to touch his face. "I deserved exactly that, to see who you really are. And who am I? Someone who chooses me," she said simply, again and again. In the car driving back to their mansion, Cordelia realized something fundamental. Somewhere between the secret garden and this family confrontation, between the mornings in the earth and the nights watching him battle his demons, she had truly become his wife. Not by contract, not by obligation, but by choice. The past never asks permission before knocking on the present's door. Vivian Sterling reappeared like an elegant ghost at a charity event at the Spoleto Festival in January. Tall, with platinum blonde hair falling in perfect waves, dressed in a fitted black dress that probably cost a small country's GDP. Her blue eyes swept the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. And they locked onto Thaddeus like a heat-seeking missile. Cordelia felt him stiffen beside her. His fingers tightened imperceptibly on her arm. "Who is that?" she asked softly, though she already knew the answer in her heart. No one else could provoke that reaction in him. "Nobody important," he replied, but his voice rang false. Vivian glided through the crowd like a snake through grass, stopping before them with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thaddeus." "What a pleasure." "Vivian." His voice was polite but glacial. "I didn't know you were back in Charleston." "Oh, you know how it is." She made a vague gesture with her manicured hand where an enormous diamond sparkled. "New York gets so boring. And then I heard about your difficulties." Her eyes slid to Cordelia, as if only now noticing her presence. "And you must be the wife. How charming." The word charming sounded like an insult. "Cordelia," she said, offering her hand with more grace than she felt internally. Vivian shook it briefly, barely a touch. "Delighted. I knew Thaddeus when he was— well, different, less complicated. Her smile widened. We should have lunch sometime and swap stories. I don't think that's necessary, Thaddeus interjected firmly. Oh, always so protective. Vivian laughed, a crystal bell sound that drew looks. Some things never change, do they? She drifted away in a cloud of Chanel perfume, leaving behind a tense silence. Do you want to leave? Cordelia asked. Yes, he admitted. But we can't. Too many important donors here. I need to manage my reputation. The evening stretched endlessly. Cordelia smiled, shook hands, made polite small talk with people who looked at her with barely veiled curiosity. That's her. The opportunistic wife. The one who married for money right before the scandal. She could read their thoughts on their faces. In the marble bathroom, as she refreshed her face with cold water, Vivienne appeared behind her like an apparition in the mirror. You know he'll never truly love you, the other woman said, reapplying her blood-red lipstick. He's still in love with me. He always has been. Cordelia slowly turned to face her. If that's true, why are you here telling me? Vivienne blinked, surprised by the comeback. People who are secure in their feelings don't need to announce them, Cordelia continued, a new strength flowing through her voice. They just live them. Brave, Vivienne murmured, her smile becoming more dangerous. But bravery isn't enough. You're a child playing in the adult's world. He married you for convenience, to calm the scandal with an image of domestic stability. But me, she leaned closer, I was the one he really wanted, the one he planned to marry. The knife of her words sank deep, finding the cracks in Cordelia's armor. Ask him, Vivienne challenged. Ask him why he still keeps the ring he bought for me. It's in his office safe. Krogan's jewel box since 1892, ask him. She left, leaving Cordelia trembling and nauseous inside. That night, in their bedroom, Cordelia couldn't hold back the question. You loved her. Vivienne. Thaddeus, who was undressing, froze. That was a long time ago. That's not an answer. Yes, I loved her. Or at least, I thought I loved who I believed she was. And now? Now? He looked at her, his grey eyes filled with something she couldn't identify. Now I wonder how I could have been so blind. She says you still keep the ring. His face paled. How does she know? He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Yes, I keep it. But not for the reasons you think. Then why? As a reminder, he said softly, to never let my heart rule my head again. To never trust blindly. He hesitated. To never allow someone to have enough power over me to break me completely. The words resonated in the silence, and Cordelia suddenly understood the terrible dilemma. He had protected himself so fiercely from heartbreak that he'd built walls she might never be able to cross. Their marriage, begun as a transaction, had always been handicapped by his fear of being hurt again. And with me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Do you keep walls too? He didn't answer immediately, and in that silence, Cordelia had her answer. Sometimes we must lose everything to discover what truly has value. March arrived with cold rains that transformed the Ashley River into a grey, tumultuous torrent. The scandal reached its peak when the Attorney General announced that Whitmore Properties would be subject to a complete criminal investigation. Shareholders voted to suspend Thaddeus from his position as CEO pending the findings. Cordelia found him in the study, sitting in darkness, financial documents scattered around him like the debris of an explosion. He didn't even look up when she entered. Thaddeus, she said softly. 30 years of work, he murmured, his voice hollow. Everything I fought for gone. She knelt before him, taking his cold hands in hers. It's not over. Yes, it is. He laughed bitterly. They'll take the company. The lawyers say that even if I'm eventually exonerated, the company won't survive the scandal. Investors have already withdrawn 70% of funding. Then you'll rebuild. With what? He finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes broke her heart. Total defeat. I'm not 25 and hungry anymore. I'm exhausted, Cordelia, so tired. The following days were the darkest. Thaddeus barely slept, ate even less. He wandered through the mansion like a ghost, physically present, but absent in every other meaningful way. Millicent resigned. She'd received a better offer from a competitor, and her departure seemed to break something more in him. Her too, he said, when Cordelia brought him the letter. After 12 years. People make hard choices when they're afraid, Cordelia tried to say. No. He crumpled the letter. People show their true nature when things get tough, and apparently loyalty has a price. He looked at her then, really looked at her. Why do you stay? The question hung between them, heavy with all the unspoken things. Because I love you, she said simply. The words came out before she could stop them, naked and vulnerable in the air. He closed his eyes as if she'd struck him. Don't say that. Why not? It's the truth. Because I can't. His voice broke. I can't give you anything now. No security, no certain future. Not even the certainty that I won't end up in prison for something I didn't do. How can you love me when I'm nothing anymore? She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You were never something to me because of your money or your company. You're the man who whispered he'd be gentle on our first night. You're the man who gardened with me at dawn. You're the man who defended my honor before your family. You're the man who kept a painful memento to protect himself from being hurt again. Tears finally overflowed from his eyes. I failed you. No, she said firmly. You failed a company, shareholders, maybe even your past self. But you haven't failed me. He collapsed then, crying in her arms with a pain that seemed to come from the deepest part of his soul. All the years of fighting, of proving his worth, of building empires to fill the void left by a loveless childhood. Everything came out in ragged sobs that shook his entire body. And Cordelia held him, just held him. Because sometimes love isn't in the grand gestures but in being present in the darkest moments. Some secrets are kept not from shame, but from fear of losing what remains. The truth emerged by accident. Cordelia was searching for documents for the lawyers in Thaddeus's study when she found a medical envelope from MUSC Hospital fallen behind a drawer. The name on the envelope was his. Test results dated 6 months before their marriage. Her hands trembled as she pulled out the papers. Medical terms she didn't fully understand: hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, ventricular dysfunction, risk of sudden death, and at the bottom of the page, a handwritten note from a cardiologist. Surgery recommended within 12 months. High operative risk, but without intervention, poor prognosis. The dates clicked in her head like pieces of a macabre puzzle. 6 months before their marriage. The generous prenuptial agreement. His rush to marry. The financial protection he'd arranged for her. He had already been planning for his possible death. You found it. She turned sharply. Thaddeus stood in the doorway, his face pale but resigned. How long? She asked, her voice shaking. How long have you known? 2 years. He entered the room, closing the door behind him. I started having symptoms: shortness of breath, chest pains, fainting. Tests confirmed it was hereditary. My biological mother died of the same thing. 2 years. She repeated the number as if she couldn't comprehend it. And you didn't tell me anything. What should I have said? He sat heavily. We were already in this awkward situation. I didn't want to complicate it further. Complicate. Anger rose in her, hot and purifying. You call this a complication? You're sick. You could... She couldn't finish the sentence. Die, he finished calmly. Yes. Is that why you accepted an arranged marriage? The words poured out now. Because you thought you didn't have enough time to find love the traditional way? Because you wanted someone to... What? Hold your hand while you die? No. He stood, his own anger finally emerging. I accepted this marriage because I'm tired of being alone. Because I spent my whole life building things, buildings, a fortune, a reputation, and I have no one to share them with. I thought... His voice broke. I thought if I just had a year, maybe 2, with someone who really knows me, it would be enough. Enough? Tears were flowing down Cordelia's cheeks now. How could it ever be enough? Because I've never had anything, he shouted. No happy childhood, no loving family. No relationships that weren't based on what I could provide. So yes, 1 year of real connection would have been enough because it would be 1 more year than I've ever had. Silence fell between them, heavy with all the exposed pain. And now, she finally asked, what's the plan now? There isn't one. He sat again, exhausted. I've been postponing the surgery for 2 years. First because I had too much work, then because of the scandal. Now, I don't know if it's worth it. How can you say that? Because I'm tired, Cordelia, he said, all the fight draining from him. Tired of fighting, tired of losing. Maybe it's a sign. Maybe it's time to let go. She crossed the room and slapped him. Not hard, but enough to shock him. You don't have the right, she said, her voice trembling with rage and fear. You don't have the right to give up. Not now. Not after saying you wanted real connection. Because this, she gestured between them, is real. My love for you is real. And you're not just surrendering. He looked at her, touching his cheek where she'd slapped him. What do you want me to do? Fight, she said simply. Have the surgery. Live. For you. For me. For us. And if I don't survive, then at least you'll have tried. She took his hands. But I refuse to watch you give up without even trying. In his eyes she saw the internal war, fear versus hope, despair versus courage, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, something changed. Okay, he finally murmured. Okay. True courage is not the absence of fear, but action despite it. The decision to undergo surgery came with a condition that shocked Cordelia. One April morning, as the cherry trees in the garden exploded in white and pink blossoms, Thaddeus called her into his study. On the desk were stacks of legal documents. "What's this?" she asked. "Property transfers." He stood by the window, looking at the garden they'd created together. "I've transferred 90% of my remaining assets. The property's not part of the investigation, personal investments, cash, to charitable trust funds, orphanages, affordable housing programs, scholarships." "You did what?" She stared at the documents, incredulous. "There's enough left to live comfortably but not luxuriously," he continued calmly. "This mansion is in your name now, legally protected from any legal action against me. The rest," he shrugged, "the rest will go where it can do good." "Why?" She didn't understand. He finally turned to face her. "Because I need to know." "Know what?" "If you stay." His grey eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "If you stay after money is no longer a factor. If you stay when I'm just a man with a failing heart and a broken past, then I'll know it's real." Tears burned her eyes. "You're testing my love." "No." He approached, taking her hands. "I'm freeing myself from my own doubts. All my life I've doubted that anyone could want me for who I am, rather than what I have. This is my last chance to know the truth. And if I leave, then I'll understand." His voice was soft, resigned. "And I won't hold it against you." She slapped him again, harder this time. "Stop it!" Her anger overflowed. "Stop looking for reasons why I should leave. Stop punishing yourself for daring to hope. I'm here. I'm staying. Not for the money. I never really wanted it. Not for the status. It only made me uncomfortable. I stay because I love you, you stubborn, insufferable idiot." A slow, disbelieving smile spread across his face. "You slapped me again. You deserved it." "Yes," he admitted. "Yes, I suppose I did." He pulled her into his arms, and for the first time since she'd discovered his illness, she felt him truly present. Not planning, not retreating, just there, with her, in the moment. "I'm scared," he admitted against her hair. "Me too. But you're staying anyway, especially because of that." The surgery was scheduled for early May at MUSC Hospital. The risk was high, 30% chance of fatal complications. But without it, doctors gave Thaddeus less than 2 years to live. The weeks before the operation were strange and precious. They spent every moment together, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his childhood in foster care, the cold nights, the constant loneliness, the fierce determination to become someone. She shared her dreams of architecture, pulling out her old sketchbooks filled with drawings of impossible buildings. "You would have been brilliant," he said, flipping through the pages. "Maybe," she shrugged, "but then I never would have met you. Do you regret it?" The question was serious. "Regret giving up your dreams?" She thought for a long time before answering. "I regret the circumstances that forced me to choose, but I don't regret the choice itself. Sometimes detours take us exactly where we need to be." They revisited Kiowa Island, the coastal area where he'd spent his first years, walked through the maritime forests, visited the ruins of the small house where fragmented memories still lived. The salty Atlantic breeze carried scents of wild rosemary and sea lavender. "I've never brought anyone here," he confessed, watching the sunset paint the water amber and crimson. "I was afraid they'd see where I came from and realize I'm a fraud." "You're not a fraud," Cordelia said, her hand finding his. "You're a survivor, and survivors are the bravest people I know." He turned to her, the setting sun gilding his profile. "If I don't wake up after surgery, don't say that. No, let me finish." He cupped her face in his hands. "If I don't wake up, I want you to know that these past months, this strange, imperfect marriage, have been the happiest of my life. You taught me that love isn't something you buy or earn. It's something you choose. And I choose you. Every day. Forever." She kissed him then, salty with her tears, the Atlantic wind wrapping around them like a blessing. "You're going to wake up," she said firmly. "And then we'll have the rest of our lives to choose each other. The longest 36 hours are those spent waiting for a miracle." The dawn of May 5th was misty and cool. Cordelia accompanied Thaddeus to the hospital in a silence heavy with love and fear. He wore a simple white t-shirt and sweatpants, such a difference from his usual suits that he seemed vulnerable, almost young. In the pre-op room, surrounded by the beeping of machines and the antiseptic smell of the hospital, they had their last moments before he was taken to surgery. "Hey," he said softly, wiping the tears she could no longer hold back. "No tears. You promised me courage." "I don't have any courage left," she admitted. "I gave it all away." "Then borrow mine." He smiled, that smile that transformed his face. "I have enough for both of us." "Doctor." Morrison, the cardiothoracic surgeon, entered with his team. Tall in his 60s, with steady hands and kind eyes behind his glasses. "We're ready, Mr. Whitmore." Thaddeus nodded but didn't let go of Cordelia's hand. "One more thing." He pulled a small blue velvet box from his sweatpants pocket, opened it to reveal a simple gold wedding band with a solitaire diamond. "This isn't the ring I bought for Vivian," he said quickly. "I sold that weeks ago and gave the money to charity. This one I chose just for you. Simple, honest, real." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. "If I wake up—" "When I wake up," he corrected, seeing her look, "I want us to start over, a real marriage. No arrangements, no contracts, just you and me choosing to build a life together." "Yes," she whispered through her tears. 1,000 times, yes." They took him away then. Cordelia watched the gurney disappear through the swinging doors, taking with it the man who had changed her life in ways she never could have imagined. The hours that followed were the longest of her life. She wandered the sterile hospital corridors, drank horrible vending machine coffee, stared at the white wall of the waiting room. Every time a door opened, her heart leapt, hoping for news. Her mother arrived midday, stronger now after months of treatment, her hair growing back in short silver curls. "My dear," she said, pulling Cordelia into her arms, "he'll make it." "You can't know that." "No," her mother admitted, "but I can believe. And you can too." Millicent appeared unexpectedly in the late afternoon. Her face was serious, but her eyes were moist. "I made a mistake," she said simply. "Leaving. He deserved better. You deserve better. May I wait with you?" Cordelia nodded, too moved to speak. They waited together, 3 women united by their love for a broken man who had tried so hard to be whole. Midnight passed, then 1, 2. At 3:37 in the morning, Dr. Morrison finally emerged from the surgery doors. His face was exhausted but carried something fragile and precious. Hope. "The surgery was successful," he said, and Cordelia felt her knees buckle. Her mother caught her. "There were complications. We had to replace more tissue than expected, and his heart stopped once during the procedure. But he's stabilized now. The next 24 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Can I see him?" "Soon. He's in recovery. Once he's transferred to ICU, you can." Cordelia collapsed into a chair, all the tension of the past hours releasing in sobs of relief and exhaustion. Her mother stroked her hair, murmuring words of comfort. Millicent sat quietly beside them, her own tears flowing silently. At 6 in the morning she was allowed to see him. He was pale, surrounded by machines and tubes, but his heart, that rebellious, failing heart, beat steadily on the monitor. She took his cold hand, careful of the IVs. "You did it," she whispered. "You stubborn, magnificent fool. You really did it." His eyelids fluttered. Slowly, so slowly, they opened. His grey eyes found hers, confused then clearing with recognition. You stayed, he murmured, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube. Where else would I be? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Anywhere. Away from this mess. You're not a mess. She kissed his forehead gently. You're my home. Sometimes, losing everything teaches us what truly has value. The recovery was long and difficult. Thaddeus, accustomed to controlling everything in his life, had to learn the humility of needing help for the most basic tasks. There were dark days when frustration overwhelmed him, when he cried with rage at not even being able to walk to the bathroom without assistance. I'm useless, he said during a particularly bad day in June, staring at the ceiling of their bedroom. You're human, Cordelia corrected, sitting beside him on the bed. Vulnerable, real, and I love you even more for it. How can you... He gestured to his weakened body. Love this? She took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I don't love this. I love you. The person inside, strong or weak, healthy or sick, rich or poor. You're who I choose. Slowly, week by week, he regained his strength. The first short walks in the garden. The first time he could climb the stairs alone. The first morning he woke without pain. And through it all their bond strengthened. Cordelia discovered facets of him she'd never seen. His absurd sense of humor when tired, his surprisingly beautiful singing voice when he thought no one was listening, his passion for American poetry. Read me something, she asked one night, curled against him in bed. He grabbed a worn volume of Whitman from the nightstand and began to read, his deep voice transforming the words into music. When he finished, she realized she was crying. Why are you crying? Because it's beautiful. She wiped her tears. And because I almost never got to know this part of you. The outside world continued to turn. The criminal investigation eventually completely exonerated Thaddeus. Evidence showed he'd been manipulated by his former partner without his knowledge. But Whitmore Properties had been too damaged to survive. The company was sold in pieces to different investors. How do you feel? Cordelia asked the day the final sale was concluded. He thought for a long time. Free, he finally said. For the first time in 20 years, I'm free. The money he received from the sale, much less than the company would have been worth before the scandal, also went to charity. They lived simply now in the mansion that belonged to Cordelia, with just enough to be comfortable. In July, Thaddeus surprised Cordelia with an unexpected proposal. How you wanted to study architecture, he said over breakfast on the terrace. I think you should. She blinked. What? You're 24. You have your whole life ahead of you. I just received medical treatment that will probably give me decades more. We have time now, so study, chase your dream. But it's expensive. I still have a few contacts, he smiled, and a few favors to call in. There's a scholarship at the College of Charleston. For mature students with extraordinary circumstances. I took the liberty of submitting your portfolio. My portfolio? She stared. How did you... Your sketchbooks. I photographed the pages and created a presentation. I hope you're not angry. Tears flowed down her cheeks. You did this for me? I did it for us, he corrected. Because your happiness is my happiness. Because seeing your eyes light up when you talk about spaces and structures is worth more than any deal I've ever made. She crossed the table to kiss him, knocking over her orange juice and not caring. In August, she started her classes. And in September, as autumn gilded the leaves of the live oaks, they received surprise invitations. Eugenia, the matriarch who had rejected them, was asking for forgiveness. The letter, written in the trembling hand of an old lady, was brief but sincere. I've seen how you've cared for each other. Forgive an old woman her blindness. You are the real family. They visited her at the grand estate in the historic district. She was frailer now, the months having taken their toll, but her eyes were clear and full of regret. You really were the one he needed, she said to Cordelia, taking her young hand in her old parchment-like one. I couldn't see it then, but I see it now. She held something out to Cordelia, a rosary of ancient pearls. This belonged to my great-grandmother. It's passed down to the matriarch of each generation. I'd like you to have it. Cordelia looked at Thaddeus, who nodded with moist eyes. She accepted the rosary, understanding it was more than a gift. It was acceptance, a blessing, a welcome into a family that had finally learned what really mattered. And the biggest surprise came in October. During a misty morning when the garden they'd created was in its autumn glory, Thaddeus led her to their secret corner near the brick wall. There, among the roses they'd planted together, stood a small white bench with an engraved plaque. She read the words through her tears. Here we learned to love. Here we chose each other. Today and forever. He knelt before her, more easily now, his body healed, and pulled out 2 new simple wedding bands. "Marry me," he asked. "Really this time. Not for the money I no longer have. Not out of obligation or arrangement, but because you're my partner, my equal, my love, because I choose you not as a transaction but as an act of faith." "Yes," she said through her laughter and tears. "Yes, yes, yes. True love is not found in grand ceremonies, but in the small daily choices." The second wedding ceremony took place on a sunny Saturday in October at St. Michael's Church, overlooking all of Charleston. There was no grand parade, no guest list of hundreds, just those who truly mattered. Cordelia's mother, her cheeks pink with restored health, laughed joyfully, helping her daughter into the simple white linen dress with Charleston embroidery on the sleeves. Millicent returned to their life not as an employee but as a true friend, arranged the flowers from the garden, old-fashioned roses, lavender, rosemary, into a wild and perfect bouquet. Eugenia arrived leaning on her cane, with the entire Whitmore family behind her. This time their faces carried warmth, acceptance, and in their eyes respect for the love that Cordelia and Thaddeus had forged through trials. When Cordelia entered the small stone chapel bathed in colored light from the stained glass windows, she saw Thaddeus standing before the altar. He wore a simple grey suit, not designer label, just well cut and honest. But what took her breath away was his expression, pure, undefended love shining on his face like the sun through clouds. The minister, Reverend Matthews, who had known Thaddeus since his early struggling entrepreneur days, smiled warmly. "We are gathered today not to begin a marriage, but to bless it, to honor the journey these 2 souls have traveled together." The vows they exchanged weren't standard words, but their own, written in separate notebooks that coincided in every important sentiment. Thaddeus spoke first, his voice strong now, clear and true. "Cordelia, you taught me that strength is not in never falling, but in getting back up. You showed me that vulnerability is not weakness, but the ultimate courage. You took a man who defined himself by what he owned and taught me to value myself for who I am. I promise to spend every remaining day earning your choice, to be gentle when the world teaches harshness, to see beauty in imperfection, to build not empires but a home where love dwells." Tears flowed openly on the cheeks of many in the congregation. Then came Cordelia's turn, her voice trembling but firm. "Thaddeus, you taught me that love is not found in fairy tales, but in hard choices. You showed me that being chosen is the greatest wealth in the world. You took a girl lost in circumstances and helped me discover my own strength. I promise to choose you every morning, to garden in the dirt with you at dawn, to hold you through storms and dance with you in sunshine, to build not a perfect life but a real one." When they exchanged the rings, those same simple gold bands he'd pulled out in the pre-op room, it was with steady hands and fully committed hearts. "By the power vested in me, and especially by the power of the love you've forged together," Reverend Matthews declared with deep warmth, "I pronounce you husband and wife, not for the first time, but for the truest." They kissed under a shower of lavender petals the guests threw, and St. Michael's bells rang through all of Charleston. The sound mingled with shouts of joy, applause, laughter that filled the sacred space. The reception was held in the garden they'd created together. String lights intertwined in the branches of the live oaks created a canopy of stars. Tables covered with simple white tablecloths held food prepared not by expensive caterers, but by friends and family. She-crab soup, shrimp and grits, Ben wafers dusted with sugar. Thaddeus spun Cordelia on the soft grass to the sound of a string quartet, and she laughed. That laugh he loved, free and without artifice. "Are you happy?" he asked, pulling her closer. "More than I thought possible," she admitted. "You?" He looked around, the smiling faces of those they loved, the garden they'd built with their own hands, his wife in his arms radiating joy. "I didn't even know this kind of happiness existed." "That's because it didn't exist," she said, gently touching his face. "We created it, together." As the sun set over Charleston, painting the sky gold, pink, and lavender, They stood together looking at their secret garden. The roses they'd planted together bloomed in autumn's golden abundance. The thyme and lavender perfumed the air, and in that perfect, imperfect moment, Cordelia understood something fundamental. Love is not found in contracts or arrangements. It's not measured in dollars or status. Love is built in the dirt, forged through trials, chosen daily anew. It's the gentle whisper in darkness, the garden created together at dawn, the hand held during the darkest storms. It's two broken souls choosing to heal together. The years that followed brought their share of challenges. There always are. But Thaddeus and Cordelia faced them, as they'd faced everything, together with courage and love. She finished her architecture studies with honors and began designing affordable social housing, merging her passion with her desire to help others. He became a consultant for young orphaned entrepreneurs, sharing not only his business expertise but also the hard-won wisdom about what really matters. They had children, 2 daughters with their father's grey eyes and their mother's free laugh. They raised them in the garden, teaching them to plant, to nurture, to cherish the beauty of things created with love and patience. And every morning, before the world woke, they met in their secret corner. Thaddeus and Cordelia, no longer rich in money, but infinitely rich in what matters. Kneeling together in the earth, their hands intertwined, creating beauty in imperfection. Because that's where their story truly began. Not in an arranged marriage or a signed contract, but in a secret garden where 2 lonely hearts learned the most important truth of all. Love is not something you find or buy. It's something you create, together, one petal at a time,